In 2018, during renovations of Salem's oldest meeting house, workers made a grim discovery beneath the floorboards: a rotting leather-bound record book, untouched for centuries. What they found inside shattered centuries of accepted history. The book contained names. Over 200 of them. Each belonged to a person long thought to have simply vanished during the chaos of the Massachusetts witch trials. But these weren't the 19 victims whose executions are recorded in history books. These were others, forgotten souls deliberately erased from public record. Their names were meticulously documented in the private ledger of Salem's most powerful family, the Blackwells. Each entry included a date of execution, a property valuation, and, beside every name, a chilling phrase: acquisition complete. This wasn't justice. It was asset seizure masked as piety. And all of it orchestrated by 3 men. Judge Ezekiel Blackwell, Reverend Nathaniel Blackwell, Sheriff Josiah Blackwell. 3 brothers. One unholy alliance. According to the ledger, the trio systematically eliminated their targets, then transferred the victims' land and wealth into their own hands. Today, their descendants still own over 40% of Salem's historic district. But one final entry stands out above the rest. October, 1720. Beside the name of a young woman, Mercy Blackwell, 5 cryptic words are scrawled in fading ink. Family matter. Resolved. What happened to Mercy? And why was her name the last? Before we uncover the terrifying truth about the Blackwell dynasty and the hidden horrors buried in Salem's past, a warning. This channel is not for everyone. Only those brave enough to confront history's darkest secrets should continue. If you're one of the few who dares to peer into the shadows, subscribe now. And comment below, which state are you watching from? Because what you're about to hear, most historians wouldn't dare to speak. And we've only just begun. Now, let us journey back to the year 1692. Salem was a village consumed by fear. Nestled in the deep woods of Massachusetts Bay Colony, its 500 residents clung to rigid Puritan beliefs, seeking protection from both the unknown wilderness around them and the imagined evils within. At the heart of Salem stood the meeting house, surrounded by clusters of wooden homes and scattered farmlands. Faith ruled every aspect of life. And towering above them all, in wealth and influence, was the Blackwell family. Their 2-story home faced the meeting house like a watchful eye. Its glass-paned windows, a rare luxury, caught the light like blades. Judge Ezekiel Blackwell, the eldest at 46, presided over the court. Stern, sharp-eyed, and dressed in austere black, he gave the impression of Puritan modesty. But behind that mask was a man quietly building a secret empire. Reverend Nathaniel Blackwell, 2 years younger, delivered Sunday sermons that shook the rafters. His gaunt face and piercing eyes seemed to see into the soul. Some whispered he could sense sin before it was spoken aloud. And then there was Sheriff Josiah, silent, brutal, and efficient. Together, the Blackwell brothers did not just influence Salem. They owned it. Sheriff Josiah Blackwell, the youngest of the Blackwell brothers at 41, enforced the laws they had written and interpreted. Powerfully built and perpetually frowning, Josiah was rarely seen without his distinctive, cart walking stick, a weapon rumored to have broken more bones than any blade or musket in Essex County. Together, the Blackwell brothers governed every facet of Salem's life, law, religion, and commerce. But winds of change were stirring. New merchants had begun opening shops, challenging the Blackwell stranglehold on trade. Families like the Putnams and the Proctors were rising in influence, chipping away at the brothers' iron grip on the town. Something had to be done. And when whispers of witchcraft surfaced, the Blackwell saw not fear, but opportunity. The winter of 1691 into 1692 was particularly brutal. Food supplies dwindled, sickness swept through crowded homes, and tempers frayed as families fought to survive the cold and hunger. Inside the home of Reverend Nathaniel Blackwell, his 16-year-old niece, Mercy, quietly watched the tension grow. Mercy, daughter of Ezekiel Blackwell, had been raised by her uncle since her mother's death in childbirth. Unlike most girls her age, she had been given an education. She could read and write in English and even some Latin. She used these skills to maintain the church's official records with neat, disciplined entries. Her copper hair was always tucked modestly beneath her cap, and her thoughtful gray eyes took in far more than she let on. She moved through Salem like a shadow, present, but unnoticed. Along with recording baptisms, marriages, and deaths in the church's main ledger, Mercy was also instructed to write certain entries in a smaller, separate book, one her uncle kept locked in his desk. She never questioned it. But she noticed. On a bitter February night, as she carried firewood to the study, she paused outside the heavy door. Her father's voice rose from within, urgent, animated. "The Porter widow's land adjoins the river, exactly the access we need," Ezekiel was saying. "She's refused to sell twice," Josiah replied, voice low and taut. "Stubborn old crone." Nathaniel's voice followed, colder and more deliberate. "Perhaps the widow Porter will soon face other troubles. There are troubling reports. Strange behavior. These are times when vigilance against the devil's work is more important than ever." Mercy froze, her breath catching in the cold air. Then came the sound that chilled her more than the winter wind, her uncle's laughter, low, satisfied, conspiratorial. 2 weeks later, the first accusations of witchcraft erupted in Salem village. Women and girls, some of them Mercy's acquaintances, were named. And as the town spiraled into fear, Mercy could not forget the conversations she'd overheard that night. She knew now, it had never been about the devil. It had always been about control. Rumors ignited across Salem like sparks on dry brush, feeding the town's growing hysteria. In the meeting house, young girls convulsed and screamed, claiming unseen tormentors. Esteemed wives were named as Satan's companions. Farmers were accused of cursing crops and poisoning livestock. At the heart of the storm stood the Blackwell brothers. Ezekiel, somber and authoritative, presided over swift, often unfounded trials. Nathaniel, ever the scholar, lent biblical weight to the madness. And Josiah stalked the village by night, wrenching the accused from their beds with little more than whispered suspicion. What began in February with 3 accused women ballooned into dozens by May. Salem's jail bulged with frightened prisoners awaiting their fate. The town turned on itself, neighbor denouncing neighbor, old feuds reinterpreted as evidence of witchcraft. Through it all, young Mercy Blackwell obediently transcribed names into her uncle's private ledger, never questioning why so many of the accused seemed to own land her father had long coveted. But when Widow Porter was taken, dragged from her home by Josiah on a storm-soaked April night, something shifted. Mercy heard her cries echo through the village. The next morning, she overheard a quiet conversation between her father and uncles. They discussed who would oversee the widow's estate now that she was in custody. Within days, Ezekiel had purchased her prized riverside property for a pittance, supposedly to cover her care in prison. As spring gave way to summer, the hangings began. Bridget Bishop was the first. On June 10, Mercy watched from a hill as her body swung from a great oak, Ezekiel's voice booming in prayer beneath the gallows. That night, unable to sleep, Mercy crept into her uncle's study. With shaking hands, she unlocked the drawer she had secretly made a key for weeks earlier. In the flickering candlelight, she opened the worn leather ledger, and her world unraveled. Inside were not only names and fabricated crimes, but detailed lists of properties, debts, and assets. Next to each entry were notes showing how the Blackwell brothers had acquired these holdings, always at deeply discounted prices. But it was what came next that chilled her to the core. Dozens of unfamiliar names. No public trial. No town records. Just dates of death and phrases like matter concluded or acquisition complete. If the ledger was to be believed, her family had not merely profited from the witch hunts, they had orchestrated them, secretly executing innocents to seize their land, wealth, and silence. The official count of witch trial victims, eventually listed as 19 in the public record, was a lie. Buried deep in a hidden ledger, the true death toll was far greater. Just when we thought the cruelty in Salem had reached its peak, it got worse. Much worse. If this tale is sending a chill down your spine, share it with someone who loves history's darkest corners. Tap that like button to support the truth, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Let's dive deeper into the unraveling nightmare of Mercy Blackwell. Summer, 1692. The heat in Salem clung to everything, air, skin, hearts. But heavier than the humidity was the atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Witch trials were happening almost hourly, with Judge Ezekiel Blackwell overseeing lightning-fast hearings. Verdicts? Always guilty. The accused faced an impossible choice. Confess and name others. Or die. From the shadows, Mercy watched as her uncle's secret ledger filled with names of the condemned. A pattern soon emerged. Those accused weren't random. They were the wealthy, the outspoken, the enemies of the Blackwell family. And in the Blackwell basement, even darker horrors unfolded. Sheriff Josiah Blackwell, her father's brother, ran secret examinations there, twisted interrogations that left prisoners broken in body and spirit. Dislocated joints, crushed fingers. Silence wasn't tolerated. One sweltering July evening, Mercy was ordered to bring refreshments downstairs. Before she even saw the scene, the air told her everything, metallic with blood, sour with sweat. In the flickering lantern light, she found Goodman Thomas Putnam, a respected landowner strapped to a chair. His face was a swollen, bruised mask. His hands, fingers bent at grotesque angles, had clearly been snapped one by one. Her father greeted her with unnatural calm. "Ah, Mercy, just in time. Goodman Putnam has just recalled seeing Goody Proctor consorting with the devil. How lucky." Putnam, through bloodied lips, looked at her. "They made me say it," he whispered. "God forgive me. They made me." Then came the crack. Sheriff Josiah's cane struck Putnam's jaw. "The devil makes men say many things," he said. "But now, you speak God's truth. Don't you?" Mercy fled. That night, unable to rest, she crept into her uncle's study. By candlelight, she copied pages from the hidden ledger and tucked them beneath a loose floorboard in her room. Someone had to know. Someone had to remember. In August, a disturbing rumor spread. Several accused witches had escaped Salem jail. Sheriff Josiah told the town they'd fled into the wilderness. But Mercy had seen the truth. The ledger said otherwise. Beside their names were chilling notes. Questioned privately, disposed of, swamp burial, eliminated quietly. One entry hit hardest. Rachel Nurse, resisted questioning, eliminated quietly. Property transferred. Family informed of escape to Rhode Island. Mercy stared at the ink until her vision blurred. This wasn't just about fear. This wasn't just about superstition. It was murder, masked by holy words. And the Blackwell brothers were getting rich from the bloodshed. What would Mercy do next? And how many more secrets waited in the dark? Stay with us as her story unfolds. Because in Salem, the devil wasn't the only monster. The official witch trial executions were only the public face of a far more sinister enterprise. Determined to uncover the truth, Mercy began taking calculated risks. She volunteered to deliver food to the prisoners in Salem jail, using the opportunity to smuggle in scraps of paper and bits of charcoal so inmates could secretly document their treatment. Outside the prison walls, she quietly approached the families of those who had escaped, asking innocent-seeming questions, carefully probing for any sign or message from the missing. Most daring of all, Mercy began compiling her own secret ledger, a meticulous record of the properties seized by her family through the trials. By September, the Blackwell brothers had amassed a staggering fortune across Essex County. Judge Ezekiel now owned 3 mills, sprawling farmland, and several commercial buildings in Salem town. Reverend Nathaniel had taken control of 2 rival churches, along with the land surrounding them. Sheriff Josiah had effectively claimed the riverside, granting him dominance over the town's shipping routes. In just 7 months, their wealth and power had grown exponentially, but so had the resistance. From Boston, the influential minister Cotton Mather sent letters raising concerns about the dubious evidence allowed in court. Even within Salem, whispers of doubt grew louder, especially after respected community members like Rebecca Nurse and John Proctor were executed despite numerous character witnesses. Sensing the shift in public sentiment, the Blackwells intensified their efforts. Mercy's secret ledger now included a list of priority acquisitions prominent landowners who had yet to be accused, including some of the wealthiest families in the colony. Their destruction would cement the Blackwell family's grip on the region for generations. Then came the night that changed everything. On a rain-soaked evening in late September, Mercy was hunched over her bed, organizing her notes by candlelight, when a floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around, heart pounding. Standing in the doorway was her cousin William, Sheriff Josiah's son. His eyes were locked on the open ledger spread before her. "I knew someone was sneaking into Father's study," he said quietly. "I just never imagined it was you, Mercy." The room fell silent. Then William stepped forward and gently closed the door behind him. "They'll kill you if they find out about this," he whispered, nodding toward the incriminating papers. Mercy straightened, bracing herself. "Will you tell them?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No. Because what they're doing is wrong. I've known it for months, but I was too afraid to say anything." He sank onto the edge of her bed, his voice trembling. "Last week, I followed my father and 2 deputies into the woods north of town. They were dragging something, wrapped in canvas. I stayed hidden and watched them. They buried Goodwife Foster in an unmarked grave." He swallowed hard. "She didn't escape to Rhode Island. That was a lie." Mercy's heart raced, hope flaring inside her. At last, she had an ally. But the feeling was short-lived. "We need proof," she said. "Real proof. Our words, mine or yours, won't be enough against them." William nodded solemnly. "Then we find it. Together." "There's a meeting tomorrow night," William said after a long pause. "All 3 of them, in Uncle Ezekiel's study. They're planning something big. They're calling it the final acquisition phase. If we could somehow hear what they're plotting." The next evening, Mercy and William crouched in a cramped storage space adjacent to Judge Ezekiel's study, a long-forgotten closet, accessible only through a narrow panel they had carefully loosened earlier that day. Through the thin wall, every word was clear as the Blackwell brothers gathered around the judge's desk. "The timing must be perfect," Ezekiel was saying, his quill scratching methodically across parchment. "When Governor Phipps returns from Boston next month, these trials may be curtailed. We must secure the remaining properties before then." "The list is ambitious," Nathaniel noted. 17 families in 3 weeks. "Even with our efficient methods, it will be difficult." "We'll accelerate the private examinations," Josiah replied, his tone cold and clinical. "Those who refuse to confess or name others, well, they need not reach the public gallows. The swamp has room enough." Ezekiel leaned forward. "What of the Corwin estate?" "That's the crown jewel," Josiah said with grim satisfaction. "The key to controlling the port and finalizing our shipping monopoly. I've already planted evidence, a puppet with pins beneath the floorboards of Corwin's kitchen. Tomorrow, we discover it during a search. By week's end, the estate will be ours." From the shadows of their hiding place, Mercy and William exchanged horrified glances. This wasn't about isolated land grabs, it was a calculated conspiracy to seize control over the region's commerce, law, and leadership. When the meeting ended, the cousins slipped out under cover of darkness, retreating to the stable where the restless stamping of horses masked their whispers. "We have to get this to Governor Phipps," William said urgently. "My father's men watch all the roads, but I know forest trails. I can be in Boston in 2 days if I leave tonight. They'll notice your absence immediately, Mercy argued. They pay less attention to me. I should go. It's too dangerous for you to travel alone. It's more dangerous to stay, she countered. They're searching the Corwin home tomorrow. What if they search ours next? They'd find everything. After a tense debate, they struck a desperate compromise. William would create a diversion near the North Road to draw attention and suspicion. Meanwhile, Mercy would slip south, undetected, with their most vital evidence, copied pages from the secret ledger and a detailed account of the brothers' plot. Her destination, Boston. Her mission, reach Governor Phipps before it was too late. The next day crept by in agonizing slowness. Mercy moved with quiet purpose, sewing incriminating documents into the lining of her cloak and tucking a small packet of food beneath her bed. As dusk fell, William set off on his errand. He was to start a small fire in an abandoned barn north of town. Just enough to cause a commotion, not enough to harm anyone, he promised. Mercy waited in tense silence, her small travel sack hidden, her heart pounding with each passing second. When the church bell finally began to toll, 3 urgent strikes signaling an emergency, she rose to move. But before she could take a step, her bedroom door burst open. Sheriff Josiah stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 deputies. His face was a mask of righteous fury. "Mercy Blackwell," he said, voice sharp with official condemnation, "you are hereby charged with witchcraft and conspiracy against godly authority." Behind him stood her father and Uncle Ezekiel, their faces blank and unreadable. "Search the room," Ezekiel ordered coldly. "The devil leaves his mark." The deputies moved quickly, practiced in their invasion. They tore through Mercy's modest chamber, soon unearthing her hidden travel sack and the documents she had so carefully concealed. Josiah examined the pages, his expression darkening with each one. "It seems my niece has been industrious," he muttered, handing the documents to his brothers. "Meetings with the Dark One. Falsehoods against godly men." Mercy could hardly breathe. "How did you know?" she whispered. Ezekiel stepped forward, his icy gaze locking with hers. "William has always been a loyal son. Did you truly think he would betray his family for the foolish delusions of a girl?" The words struck like a blow. Mercy's knees nearly gave out. William, her confidant, her ally, had betrayed her. She had trusted him completely. "Take her to the special holding room," Nathaniel ordered. "We begin her examination tonight. By morning, she will confess, and name her accomplices." The deputies dragged Mercy away, her feet barely touching the floor. As they passed through the hallway, she caught a glimpse of William. He stood in shadow, face unreadable, but his trembling hands betrayed his guilt. The special holding room was a root cellar beneath the meeting house, damp, airless, reeking of mildew and secrets. It was where the Blackwells conducted their most private interrogations. Mercy was roughly tied to a chair, the cold from the stone floor seeping into her bones. She knew now, her story would never be recorded in any official record of the Salem witch trials. Like so many before her, she would vanish, silenced. Moments later, Ezekiel entered alone, shutting the heavy door behind him. In his hands, he held the very ledger that had started Mercy's investigation. "I had such hopes for you," he said softly, setting the book on a nearby table. "You were intelligent, obedient. You could have been an asset to our family's future." Mercy stared at him, summoning what courage remained. "How many?" she asked, voice raw. "How many innocent people have you murdered for their land and titles?" Ezekiel shrugged. "People die in times of unrest. Some publicly, to make examples. Others more discreetly, when public scrutiny might interfere." He opened the ledger to the final pages. "The official record will end with 19 executions. But the true number?" He gave a thin smile. "Let's just say the Blackwell legacy is secure for generations." "You won't get away with this," Mercy said, though her voice trembled. "Governor Phipps will investigate. People are already questioning the trials. By the time they act, there will be no evidence. No witnesses. Ezekiel picked up a quill and dipped it in ink. Now, I have one final entry to make. The question is, what shall I write beside your name, daughter? The tension in that root cellar would mark the turning point in Salem's darkest chapter, though few would ever know the full truth of what transpired there. As the infamous Salem witch trials reached their terrifying climax in October of 1692, a strange confluence of events quietly reshaped history. Governor William Phipps, returning unexpectedly from Boston, issued a proclamation forbidding further arrests based solely on spectral evidence. Officially, this marked the end of the hysteria. But unofficially, something, or someone, had triggered this sudden change. No public record notes her name, but a mysterious letter had reached the governor's desk days before. It contained disturbing evidence of judicial misconduct, property seizures, and the systematic targeting of specific families. The handwriting was elegant. The signature simply read, M.B. Then, on October 29, Colonial officials uncovered the private ledger of the Blackwell brothers during a surprise inspection. That same night, the brothers vanished, along with several deputies loyal to the infamous Sheriff Josiah. Whispers spread, they had fled to Virginia. Or maybe the Caribbean. They didn't go empty-handed. For decades, the colony buried what it couldn't explain. Eager to move past the shame of the trials, leaders focused on the 19 documented executions. The others, those who vanished, were forgotten. Families were told their loved ones had fled in fear. Few dared question that version of events. Until 1720. That year, during renovations of the old Salem meeting house, workers stumbled upon a hidden chamber beneath the floor. Its walls were etched with names. And dates. Dozens of them. Shallow graves nearby held human remains, and the stone walls bore the dark stains of blood. Amid the debris, a journal was found, water-damaged but still partially legible. Its author was identified only as M.B. The entries described her imprisonment and the night she narrowly escaped death. One passage stood out. When they came for me that final night, I believed death was certain. But as Uncle Josiah raised his knife, a commotion above stayed his hand. William appeared at the cellar door, not as betrayer, but as savior, having led the governor's men to our location. In the chaos that followed, I witnessed divine justice. My father and uncles, architects of so much suffering, fled like rats into the night. But I know they will not stop. Wherever they go, their cruelty follows. I write this so those who come after will know. Salem was not possessed by demons. It was robbed by men. The official record claims 19 victims. The true number nears 237. Their names are here, in the Blackwell ledger, and on these walls, where so many breathed their last. I write this in October, 1720. I have returned to Salem after years in hiding, determined that the truth will not remain buried forever. The final page ends mid-sentence, stained with what appears to be blood. No record exists of what became of Mercy Blackwell after that entry. Some say she was silenced by those who still carried the Blackwell name, relatives desperate to keep their crimes hidden. Others believe she disappeared once more, determined to expose the legacy of murder and theft. But time does strange things to secrets. And sometimes, the truth refuses to stay buried. In the centuries that followed, Blackwell descendants quietly scattered across New England, many changing their names. Property records show their families retained control over some of Salem's most valuable land well into the 1800s. More disturbing still are letters recently uncovered, dated between 1695 and 1730, indicating that the Blackwell brothers established a new power base in the southern colonies, where the same patterns of corruption, disappearances, and sudden property transfers emerged again and again. The Salem witch trials remain one of America's most infamous injustices. But what if we've only seen the surface? This story reveals a deeper horror, not of witches or curses, but of greed, ambition, and human cruelty disguised as divine justice. So, do you believe the full truth has been revealed? Or are there still Blackwell secrets waiting to be uncovered? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more stories that unearth the darkest parts of our past, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves historical mysteries. This channel isn't for everyone, only for those brave enough to face the truth. See you in the next story.